is the Awesemo MLB Live Before Lock show, sandwiched in between a whole host of other shows that are going on the Awesemo YouTube channel, which is all the more reason that you should be subscribed to our YouTube channel, because not only do we have MLB right now, but we just had an NBA/MLB show before. There's going to be a couple of NBA shows coming up later. Then, of course, throughout the course of the week, there are shows for sports that I don't even know what they are, but because there's DFS for everything, we have content for everything. All the more reason. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Help us help you and get all our advice. But beyond that, pretty exciting day. We've got MLB DFS. I've been trying to navigate the Topps MLB NFT site. Are you in on that, Max?
I'm not in on the baseball. I just do the top shot so far.
Okay. It hasn't started yet.
Okay.
Like tomorrow's the first day that they have packs out, but they had like some promo and free stuff today that
Gotcha.
My brother and I tried to get on. And as is true for what seems like every NFT website, just the site doesn't really work well. Everything's wonky. Like it says you have stuff in your inventory. You click on it to open up a pack. It's like, you don't actually have this. So it's just everything. I don't know what it is about this space, but maybe it's just there's so many people trying to make money quickly at this point where just stuff pops up so quickly and there's so much more demand than anybody's able to put up with. But hey, that's how it goes. But today's show, by the way, sponsored by Jock Market. So talking about different ways to invest, Jock Market, really, I mean, everybody's into investing now, and we're looking at players as stocks on the Jock Market. And the way it works is there's an IPO period. You bid on players. And by the way, not just for NBA, not just for MLB, but also for NHL and PGA. So there's an IPO period where you're able to bid on the players. Then you own the players basically as if they are stocks. Then depending on where they finish in terms of total fantasy points at the end of the night, that's how much determines where your return is. If you go download the Jock Market app, use the promo code Awesemo20, it'll get you a $20 bonus on your first deposit. So go check out the Jock Market. And we do Thursday night shows, me and Eric Lindquist, where we talk about it. But there's also MLB, like I said. There's PGA, there's NHL. So go check that out. But let's start getting into this slate here, Max. And I think the first thing that stands out that's nice, no weather concerns.
Beautiful.
There's no rain. We're just kind of looking at the slate as is, small slate. Do you have any overarching thoughts about any sort of lineup construction here? Or do you just want to kind of get into the positions and whatnot?
So for me, I kind of want to avoid the chalky pitchers today. Just because 6-game slate, there's going to be a lot of overlap in how people are going to play this. You're like the Angels and the Dodgers, or you're like your preeminent stacks, and then everybody's going to fit in like an expensive pitcher with Bundy or whoever it is down low. So I kind of want to get away from that build and go a little bit off the board and as we get into the guys.
All right. That's interesting to me. So, and by the way, starting with the pitching, there are a handful of pitchers that have now become chalk. So by the way, the ownership has been fluctuating all over the place. So there is some ownership that's pretty wildly different from early in the day when I did the strategy show with Spags. Most notably, Kevin Gausman. He was somebody who was only projecting for, I think it was like 15% ownership. He's up to 32% now. But here are the chalk pitchers right now on DraftKings. We have Joe Musgrove, Dylan Bundy, Danny Duffy, Kevin Gausman. These guys all picking up between 30 and 40% ownership. And then we'll talk about the Fanduel pitchers in a second. But are you looking to avoid all of these guys, or are there any of them that you're looking at as good plays in this 30 to 40% ownership range?
I like Gausman. I actually wrote him up here, but he was projected for way less ownership when I wrote him up. So I think like Chase Anderson is going to be my pivot off of Gausman and like the other cheap chalk. And I mean, do you want to talk about him now, or do you want to wait and like kind of bury the lead?
Let's start with just so we're kind of on some sort of a path.
Yeah.
Let's start with some of these chalk plays here and kind of bang them out. The one guy who I am getting to a lot in my builds is Dylan Bundy.
Yeah. I mean, 7,700 is super cheap.
And that's really why it's the 7,700 price tag on DraftKings. He's also my favorite pitcher on FanDuel, even for single pitcher sites. So 7,700, even at 9,000 on FanDuel, I think he's a good play. And then it's also a really strong matchup against the Texas Rangers, who they strike out a ton. They don't hit the ball much. So I just look at all that together. Also on the road, Texas is on the road. I mean, so Bundy pitching at home in Los Angeles. He's pitched well this year. So to me, Bundy is the overall top pitching play on the slate. He's the guy that I'm most heavily overweight on amongst the chalk pitchers. Like I have some, and me and you play differently. Also, I play more lineups. You play more single entry, 3-entry max. So I have exposure to Joe Musgrove. I have exposure to Kevin Gausman, but I'm now underweight to the field on these guys. but I'm overweight to the field still on Dylan Bundy. If you had to roster one of these chalk pitchers, let's say this, if you're picking 2 pitchers to roster in a cash game on DraftKings, which 2 are you going with?
Oh, that's easy. It's Musgrove and Bundy.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. They're by far and away the best projections that we have. And you don't really care about ownership like in cash games. So just play the guys with the best expectations. I think in GPPs, it's really interesting to go down from Musgrove to like a Woodruff or a May. Just because, Musgrove was like sort of still an unknown commodity to me. He was fine. Like he was a 7K pitcher, I would describe him as in Pittsburgh. And then just like everybody else that leaves the Pirates and goes to a different team, people just, make them pitch differently. Like his pitch mix is completely different. He's only throwing 20% fastballs now and a lot of off speed and cutters and sliders, which is his strength. That's what he should have been doing all along. For some reason, Pirates just can't figure out their way in how to best utilize their pitching prospects. So they trade them for nothing and then they become stars. So Musgrove is definitely in a great spot. Like Milwaukee is not a good lineup at this point, especially without Yelich. But 10-2 is like a price prohibitive to think here, especially if you want to roster, Trout like I do, and like these Angels and Dodgers.
Yeah, it's really funny you bring that up because that's almost the exact same point that I made when I did the strategy show earlier where Spag was hosting, I was the analyst, and we were talking about some of the pitchers, and I was talking about Joe Musgrove. I said, hey, going forward, why are we not just getting ahead of it and targeting every pitcher that leaves the Pirates? It happens with all of them now, right? We've seen it with Joe Musgrove, Garrett Cole. Trevor Williams is even pitching decently this year, and he was total garbage when he was with Pittsburgh. So it's been the case with a lot of guys now where they have some talent, they leave Pittsburgh, they kind of get reinvented elsewhere where another pitching staff works with them. So, with all that said, so I do think Joe Musgrove is one of the safer pitching options on the slate.
For sure.
And by the way, in my build right now, he is my second most rostered pitcher. The thing is, though, he is so popular right now where he's picking up 32% ownership on Fanduel. On DraftKings, he's now projecting for 43% ownership. That even with him being the pitcher that I'm rostering the second most of everybody, I'm underweight to the field on him because he's so popular. So if anybody rosters him, I don't have an issue with that. I'm rostering him too. I'm just not rostering him as much as the field because I find it very hard to get him in over half my lineups. You said, at that kind of price tag. He's very expensive. Yeah.
So my favorite pivot off of him was Dustin May.
Same.
So he's still playing a team that struck out 25% last year. So this is a guy that throws like 97. He has good strikeout stuff. He kind of came back down to earth with a swinging strike rate, where in his first game, it was like 16%. And I was like, oh my God, he's going to be like one of these awesome guys like he's always been projected to be. But he just throws his fastball a little too much, where at 60%, he's not going to get that many swings and misses. But he's going to go deep in games. His xFIP is still awesome. He projects really well for me. And $500 less than Musgrove and projected at what? Like, I think he's in the single digits.
5%.
That's insanity. For GPPs, this is like a must play for me.
I totally agree with you. I talked about it. I talked about him earlier also. So, I mean, the pushback here is going to be how deep do you expect Dustin May to work into the game?
Yeah, I mean, it's versus Seattle. Like, I expect them to go pretty deep. They don't really hit the ball well. They strike out a ton. And May just throws strikes. So he doesn't need to throw 110 pitches to pitch 8 innings, He could go 7 innings, throw 90 pitches, and give you a 30-point score.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, I mean, if you look at some of Dustin May's numbers, a couple of things to consider. Number one, he is one of the top young pitching prospects in baseball. Yeah. So even though over the last couple of years, the times we've seen him in the big leagues, the strikeout numbers haven't been there. They've been there for him so far this year. Now, very small sample size, right? And maybe it's a little bit of confirmation bias here on my part because I'm really looking for a lone pitcher to be on this slate. And I see Dustin May projected for 5% ownership in both FanDuel and DraftKings. It looks so appealing to me, and I am definitely looking for reasons to buy in. Really favorable matchup against the Mariners, and so far this year, the strikeouts have been there. He's striking out over 12 hitters per 9 innings. His swinging strike rate is up to 14.3%. And so given his acumen as a pitching prospect, I think there is reason to be bullish on him going forward and think that there are tangible improvements that we should just expect him to make based on him being a 23-year-old who's a top prospect and is in a really good organization like the Dodgers, who we've seen develop a number of high-end starting pitchers. So I'm buying Dustin May going forward. Is he the pitcher you want to get the most exposure to of anybody on this slate, or is there a different pitcher that's a favorite for you?
He's my SB1 that I'm going to have the most exposure to. I might even go 100% on him if I want to avoid Musgrove completely. The other thing I looked at is he's really not giving up hard hits at all. He's given up 10 hard hits in 2 games this year. That's insane. And 0 barrels. If you're going to give up 0 barrels, and especially against Seattle that swings and misses so much, he should be really in line for a top game.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I feel too. The other thing too is what's the real opportunity cost? Obviously Joe Musgrove could go out and pitch a really good game, except, I mean, on paper, what's the opportunity cost? A week ago, let's say before the no-hitter, would you have ever considered rostering Joe Musgrove for 10,200? So, and it's, like I said, it's not even a knock against Musgrove. If you're playing cash games, roster Musgrove. He's the safest play for cash games, especially based on the ownership. But still, I mean, I look at 10,200 for Musgrove. This has to be a ceiling price for him. I don't see a way going. If you tell me Joe Musgrove is going to be more or less expensive going forward and I had to bet my life on it, the answer is under. And I rarely in DFS like to roster somebody when they're at their peak price. Now, if you tell me going forward, is Dustin May going to be more or less expensive than 9,700 on DraftKings? I honestly don't know. He could be more expensive. Like I said, he has ridiculous stuff. His average fastball velocity this year is 99.2 miles per hour. Could he be one of the better fantasy pitchers in the league this year? Absolutely. So I'm not saying with 100% confidence that's the case, but I feel better than the 5% ownership he's projected for. So
for sure.
As far as tournaments go, I love Dustin May. I think he's definitely somebody to get overweight to the field on. Now let's talk about some of these cheaper starting pitching options, starting with the overall chalk SP2 on DraftKings. Danny Duffy at 7,000 getting rostered in 40% of lineups right now. I assumed that number was going to go down during the day. Apparently not the case, because this is the exact same number it was earlier. So what do you make of a 40% owned Danny Duffy?
I mean, he was the Angels with a chalk last time against Duffy. And I was actually kind of cold on him because Duffy, his problem has always been, injured and his fastball velocity has been down. It's back up to 94.5 this year at average, which is really good. The problem is he still gives up a bunch of fly balls and hard hits. That's just who he is as a pitcher. He lives around the plate, so that's just going to happen. His xFIP looks really good. I think because of the ownership, I don't see the ceiling for him like I do for some of the other guys we're going to talk about. The Rays do strike out more on average, but less against lefties than they do righties. And some of these guys like Brosseau, Diaz, from the right side, this is their best platoon that they could possibly have. Even Willie Adames. When they start versus righties, they've become much more of a strikeout threat than a home run threat. And versus lefties, it's vice versa. So yeah, I mean, it's 41 degrees in Kansas City, which seems really cold and really good pitching weather. But I don't know, I think there's pivots here. And at 40%, I just don't want Duffy in GPPs really.
Yeah, so I have Danny Duffy in my player pool right now, but I mean, even so, I think my last build, let's see, what percentage I have? I could just bring this up. So yeah, so my last build, I have Danny Duffy at 17%, which is less than half of what the field has. And to me, I'm like, hey, I think Danny Duffy, if you just came into this slate, not knowing ownership or anything, you said, hey, Danny Duffy is 7,000 against the Rays, I would say, cool, that's somebody I want in my player pool. But then as the ownership starts to come out, it's like, all right, I have to keep decreasing the amount of him that's in my lineups personally because the ownership is getting to be so high. So he's not going to be a just total outright fade for me, but he's somebody I'm going to be fairly significantly underweight to the field on. And I do think it makes sense to get stacks of the Rays as leverage. And we'll talk about stacks in a second. But who do you like as a pivot? So for me, I'm just eating the chalk on Dylan Bundy as an SP2 on DraftKings. But I do think that there are some other guys for cheap that I'm willing to get to. But who are the guys that stand out to you? Yeah,
so for me, it was the Anderson and Gausman from the San Fran game. So Anderson has always been a reverse splits guy because he throws that changeup 35%. So he's really has a better swinging strike rate against lefties. And he's going to face five lefties in a pitcher today. And the righties he's facing are like Longoria, Posey, kind of like has-beens. So I like Anderson here, basically no ownership, because, Bundy and Gaussman and Duffy are going to get all the ownership here. I think he's a really good GPP play for somebody to go over, 5% he's projected right now. So over the 5%. And then Gaussman, I really liked when he was less owned. He's got really good swing and miss stuff. He kind of got unlucky last start, got hit hard. He's got that split finger, which works really well against righties, and he's going to face 5 righties here. Bryce Harper is like one guy I feel like is going to hit a home run off him today. So that's a one-off that I really like, an expensive one-off. But other than that, nobody really scares me in that way. And I think there's a lot of strikeouts here.
If I had to go with one low-owned starting pitcher with just no ownership as an SP2, I'd go to Joe Ross over Chase Anderson.
I actually have Ross written up as well, but he's 7,900. So in that 6K range, it's a little bit different.
And to me, I just think Chase Anderson's terrible. He's been he was decent when he first came into the league, and you just look at his ERAs, his peripheral stats, like they've progressively gotten worse. The point where last year it's like he's giving up he's giving a 7.12 ERA, and I think everything has to be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt. But I just don't think Chase Anderson's very good, nor do I think he's a very good DFS pitcher. With Joe Ross, I have him overweight to the field, but that's not saying much. He's 1%. He's projected for 1% ownership right now, and maybe this is a little bit of bias on my part because I was somewhat heavy on Joe Ross for his last start and was way overweight to the field, and he did really well last time. Yeah. But I still, there are certain things about Joe Ross I buy into. He was once a very well-regarded pitching prospect, and things have gone south for him since then, but it's mainly been due to injuries, right? He's like pretty regularly been a guy who's only able to make like 5, 6, 7 starts a year. Then he gets hurt. Everything breaks down. But here are the positives. He sat out last year due to COVID concerns. He opted out of the season. If there's any time that Joe Ross is going to be healthy, it's going to be now. It's the start of a new season. He didn't play at all last year, so he's gotten a long break. So somebody with that kind of background, I think the time off is good for him. And then you look at the velocity number so far. His velocity is up so far this year. His velocity, 93.2 miles per hour, up slightly for his career average velocity. So I think Joe Ross is healthy, and he's not somebody I'm rushing to get in my lineups, but right now I have him in 7%, which is way more than the field has at 1% right now. So I like him within reason as a low-owned play. So I think he's somebody, if you're playing like 20 lineups, put Joe Ross in one of them and you're 5x the field on him. Yeah. So my write-up on Ross here, I think he's a better play than Flaherty, and he's 1/20th of the ownership of Flaherty. So like him and Flaherty project so similarly to me. They have the similar swinging strike rates, and one guy is just super low owned. And Flaherty is not like who he was when he first came up. And actually, like the Nats lineup scares me a little bit more than the righty heavy lineup versus Ross. Like he's always been good versus righties, even when he was hurt. He just gets a million ground balls versus them. So yeah, I really like Ross over Flaherty here, and I would go under the field on Flaherty. I really just don't think he's a good play in the spot at all. All right. Shout out to our friend, Mr. Pibb. Thank you for the super chat. I see what you're doing here. And by the way, I'll just read the name. He thinks like I'm not going to be hip to this, but so he asked if I have any love for Urinator tonight, which by the way, if you're going for a phony name, you got to be a little bit more creative than that. Like there's no point I'm going to look at this. There's like any love for a minimum Urinator. Like that's like not even a realistic name. In his first MLB start tonight. Game has a high total, so he could bat a bunch of times. Thanks. No, I have no interest for me in Urinator. But hey, like I said, like let's come up with a little bit of better names, and maybe you'll catch me in the future. I don't know if that counts. Like I still read it just because I was like, oh, this could make for some content on the show, but. Yeah, we only have 6 games. So. Yeah, but not fooling me there. Any pitchers that you think are worth mentioning that we have not talked about? Only 6 games. So we've kind of gone over everybody at this point. Yeah, pretty much everybody else I want to stack against. I guess we can talk about Woodruff. Okay, yeah. Off of the expensive guys. He's finally priced up. Like he's been in the 7Ks. He's finally 9K, and I think that's why his ownership is way down. Yeah, I mean, he had a very good last start, even though his swinging strike rate was down, and he got hit pretty hard from the left side by the Cubbies. Didn't result in anything. I think he gave up 1 run and still won the game. But yeah, I think Woodruff is interesting here as another pivot. So Woodruff, let me bring up. I have him in my build. I think I have him right now about even with the field though.
Yeah.
He's somebody who I think he's a little bit overpriced, but it's tantalizing strikeout upside. So I think that
Yeah.
makes him worth being in the player pool. Just based on us having really crappy pitching options tonight, but
Yeah.
that matchup against San Diego was really scary for me to click that button and really get him into too many lineups, especially because Tatis is back, which I brought this up before, and I don't know about you. Like, I didn't even realize that Tatis was going to be back so soon. I just assumed he was going to be out for a really long time. And then the Padres lineup comes out. I think it was Saturday the day it came out. It's like Tatis is in the lineup. I was like, really? I didn't know that was going to be a possibility. But all right, so that pretty much covers everybody. But just to summarize, who is overall your favorite SP1 and SP2 on DraftKings?
For SP1, I'm gonna go with May. And for SP2, I'm still gonna play Bundy a little bit just because I'm playing May. If I was like in GPPs, I wouldn't go May and Musgrove, but Musgrove and Bundy. But May and Bundy, it makes a lot of sense to me. Just it does have really good projection.
Yep, I'm on the same page as you. May and Bundy on DraftKings. If you're playing cash games, I would say you go Musgrove and Bundy.
Yeah.
And then FanDuel, my favorite GPP pitcher is Bundy for cash games. I still say go Musgrove just because he's projected for so much ownership that it's really hard for me to avoid any kind of starting pitcher in a decent matchup when they could potentially be owned in like 60, 70% of lineups on a single pitcher site. Because if you just get a ceiling game for Musgrove, you're behind the 8 ball. So easy enough to just play the ownership game in that situation. So let's get into the stacks now. And I think the first thing we need to talk about here is we bring up the top stacks of the day. The Los Angeles Dodgers currently projecting for a 16.5% chance of being the top overall scoring team on the slate. That is by far the highest mark of any team of the day. So what are you doing with the Dodgers, who are projecting just to be the most likely team by a fairly wide margin?
Yeah, I'm going to go under here just because I don't think Sheffield is that bad. Like, he's a mid-threes xFIP. He's not a great fantasy pitcher. So he doesn't strike many guys out, but he also doesn't give up too much hard contact. So I definitely like the Dodgers less than I do the Angels here, who are projected close to them in our top stacks too. So yeah, under for me on the Dodgers. But I do think there's some interesting one-ups here, especially their cheap guys like Pollock and Moose.
So the Dodgers, what's funny is earlier in the day, they had a 17.8% chance of being the top scoring team on the slate and a 17.8% ownership share. And I was like, boy, the field is right on with them. But yeah, the ownership has crept up and their odds of being the top stack team has gone down a little bit. So the Dodgers are probably going to be the team I stack the most. But even with that said, that won't get me to the field just because nearly 20% of the field is rostering them.
Yeah.
And it's very rare that I'm ever going to have a stack that I'm over 20% on. Like, unless there's just, a Coors Field with this goofy pricing and it's something where it's like, hey, we have them with a 30% chance to be the top scoring team on the slate. I just don't ever get to stacks at a 20% clip on a slate that has 6 games. So Dodgers are probably going to be my highest owned stack, but I'm still probably going to end up being underweight to the field on them just because the ownership is so high. So what is your overall priority team to stack?
For me, it's the Angels, just because I'm really not sold on Kohei Arihara being a major league pitcher. I know he did better against the Rays last start. I was all over stacking against him. He gave up like 400 foot flyouts. So it is what it is. But he just gives up way too much hard contact for me. And the Angels hitters just up and down the lineup can really take him deep here, where I don't think that can happen against Sheffield, who gives up less hard contact than Arihara does. And also, I like that the Angels are playing at home, and it's like almost 70 degrees there. So I feel like that's a way better park and way better situation than playing in Seattle, where it's not a very good park for home runs in Seattle, and it's a much better park for home runs in LA. So yeah, for me, it's the Angels, and I think they are 14%.
They're up to 17% projected ownership right now on DraftKings,
and 14% top stack percentage.
Yeah, and on FanDuel, pretty similar. 16% projected ownership, 14% top stack odds. So I'll probably be going underweight to the field on them also just because of the negative leverage. But certainly as a pay-up option, it's a team I'm going to have exposure to. I'm just going to be underweight to the field. The stack that a couple of stacks that I like overall the most right now. On the expensive end for me, it's going to be the San Francisco Giants. I know you said you like Chase Anderson a little bit, and I mean, he's going really low owned. So from that standpoint, I could see how it wouldn't be that hard to see him potentially having better odds of landing the optimal after what his ownership is. But I prefer the Giants side of the game. There's just been such heavy regression for Chase Anderson from his first full season in the big leagues. He's gotten progressively worse and worse. The San Francisco Giants offense, while it's not great by any stretch, we still have them with a 12% chance of being the top overall stack on the slate. That is a decent amount higher than what their ownership is, and they are one of the offenses with the highest positive leverage on the slate. So as a pay-up option, give me the San Francisco Giants. And I mean, pay-up is kind of taken with it's not like they're expensive like the Dodgers or Angels or anything, except they're also not super cheap by the same merit either. So I like the Giants as my high-end offense. The team, like I said, we have them with the third best chance of being the highest scoring team on the slate. They're not getting represented that way. So Giants are going to be a priority for me. I know you said you like Anderson. Do you have interest in stacking against him as well?
I don't know if I want to stack. I definitely want to play some one-offs here. Like I know I said he was past his prime, but I really like Longoria here. It's a great matchup. Chase Anderson gives up a ton of hard hits and fly balls to righties. And Longoria can still take him deep. So I really like Longoria here as a one-off. Austin Slater is interesting. Kurt Casale at catcher is really interesting with 3K. So yeah, I think if you mix in the righties and take like a Belton and a Dickerson, who are really way too cheap with them, I think it makes for a nice stack. So yeah, I don't mind stacking against Anderson. Obviously, he's not like a lights out guy. I just think that he has more upside than his ownership projects.
And then are there any contrarian offenses you like or a team you think that sets up as good leverage, maybe a good value offense you're looking at for cheaper?
So I don't know if they're cheap, but I like the Nats here against Flaherty. Like Soto, Schwarber, Bell, and Turner is just a really nice foursome up top. And then you can take somebody cheap like a Robles or a Gomez or a Castro down there to stack with them. I think there's a lot of upside there. I don't think Flaherty is as good as his pedigree suggests. And these are just really good hitters. Plus, the Nats Park has always been prime for home runs. So I like that part.
So for me, it's kind of hard because the Royals do not rate out well in all. I mean, the Rays don't rate out particularly well in our top stacks. Still, it looks like they're going a little bit over-owned. But with that said, there is so much ownership going to Danny Duffy right now that if I'm going to be underweight to the field on Duffy, I'm going to take a stand and go overweight to the field on the Rays. I just think there's so much leverage to be had there. A little bit of concern with the weather. Like you said, it's cold. There's also wind blowing in. Yeah. But if Danny Duffy could potentially, struggle with his command or just anything that happens to where he gets blown up, it's something we've seen a handful of times this year with Ponce de Leon, that he was chalk. He ends up scoring -18 Draftkings points. A couple of days with Yuscar Yanoa, he was a chalk play. He ends up getting blown up by the Cubs, and they end up being the top scoring stack on the slate. We see this very often where just there are pitchers who are mediocre that end up garnering a ton of ownership. That's a situation I like to stack against them. I think that makes for really good leverage. And honestly, if Danny Duffy has a good game, my lineups are screwed anyway, right? I'm going to be underweight to the field on a pitcher's 40% owned in GPPs. Yeah. If he has a good game, my lineups are most likely toast for the day, which is I'm always looking to play the leverage game in baseball. That's how I think you're successful in the long term in GPPs. Sure. So give me a stack against a really chalky pitcher, and this is the spot I like to stack against a chalky pitcher for leverage. If it's somebody like Jacob deGrom, Garrett Cole, no, like that's almost never going to work out. Point. But Danny Duffy, like how often is Danny Duffy going to have a great start? Every once in a while, but not with consistency. So that's where I kind of get on the Rays. Does that make sense to you as a leverage play, or are the conditions enough that you just would prefer to not roster either side as much?
I like one-offs more from the Rays than I do a stack just because of the conditions. But I think Duffy's can give up some home runs here. And all these guys hit for power. Like they don't hit for average for sure. They hit for power and they strike out. So for me, do I see the Rays like batting around a bunch of times? Probably not. But I definitely see them as being a viable contrarian option, stack or one-off ones. Can I talk to you about the Rangers a little bit?
Go for it.
I just found something interesting. Like there's 3 guys in this Rangers lineup that have faced Bundy more than 10 times and have never struck out. Isn't that weird? Like he's a strikeout guy. So Kiner Falefa has faced him 10 times, no strikeouts. And like 2 home runs against him. Willie Calhoun never struck out, 2 home runs against him. Brock Holt, 17 at-bats, never struck out, has 10 hits and 17 at-bats against Bundy. It's just like a crazy weird coincidence that they're all on the same team facing Bundy here. I don't know. It doesn't get me off Bundy in any way, but I think if you want to like make a contrarian stack, taking those guys and putting in like a Gallo and Lowe with them makes for some upside, especially playing in the Angels park.
I can't get on them. I can't get on it. I don't want anything to do with the Rangers. I'm going to be really high on Bundy. Like if I'm being honest, the way I build lineups, I rarely have 0% of a team. So it's like, I'm not going to have 0 Ranger stacks across 150 lines, but nothing of significance. This isn't a team I'm making a real investment in. We only have with a 6% chance of being the top scoring team of the day. And I'm going to be pretty invested in Dylan Bundy. So the way I'm personally going for leverage, and I think from a leverage standpoint, if Dylan Bundy ends up with a whole bunch of ownership, and if somebody isn't sold on Dylan Bundy, then yeah, from that standpoint, it makes sense to stack the Rangers, but that's not where I'm going with my lineups personally. I'm going to be very heavy on Dylan Bundy. He's currently my highest, my most rostered pitcher. So that's where I'm going. Want to go into the positions now, or is there any other pitcher or any other stats you want to talk about?
I think like the main takeaway is if you're going to make contrarian stacks, like I wouldn't make them against guys like May and guys like Musgrove. I would stack against, the 7K guys that are getting 40% ownership. That's my takeaway from you.
Let's see. Yeah, there's no other offense I really want to talk about. So we can get into the position by position. But first, guys, we are running a pretty good promo right now. Max and I, before we got on, we were talking about some of our MMA lineups over the weekend. I got pretty lucky where I did not really have much exposure to the co-main event. So that really helped me. I know our guy, Colt, Steve Buzzard, he ended up taking first in the $15 over the weekend. And we have a pretty good promo this year, this week, going for a UFC 261 Usman versus Masvidal that takes place on April 24th. So if you use the promo code UFC 261, that is UFC and then the numbers 261, you'll get 50% off your first month of Awesemo Plus MMA. That is promo code UFC 261. That's $14.95 for 30 days of Awesemo Plus. And here's what I think is kind of good about this is, we've run a lot of, like weekly promo codes for UFC, but the issue becomes is you're really only paying for one DFS slate. With a monthly package, you're getting 4 cards. It's going to be 4 slates. So that is going to last through this Saturday, April 24th. You use the promo code anytime up until then. That'll be 50% off a monthly pass. So 30 days of Awesemo Plus. So if you're interested in UFC and interested in MMA DFS, that is a great deal to check that out. So now we can get into the positions here, starting with the catchers. The guy who I have the most exposure to now and hopefully ends up being in the lineup for the Dodgers, I haven't seen if the lineup came out yet, is Will Smith. It is really hard to get power upside out of catchers, which is why on Fanduel, I think they're really worth rostering. But on Draftkings, where we have to roster a catcher, I'm usually either looking to punt the position or pay up for somebody that actually has power upside. Will Smith, one of the best hitting catchers in baseball. So he's the guy who right now I have more exposure to than anybody else.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. In the same vein of like taking high upside catcher, Salvador Perez against the lefty is always been a good spot. I really like Kurt Casale at 3K. Now that the lineups come out and he's starting over Posey, I think he has power upside versus Chase Anderson here. Let's see who else. It's really about it. Like catcher is pretty barren today.
It's pretty barren every single slate. So let's see.
Yeah.
Is there anybody that's standing out to you as a punt play? I'm just going through my exposures.
Yeah, Casale's 3K. I like that play.
If there also we don't have a whole
lot of lineups Trevino
yet.
At 3.3. Huh?
I was gonna say we don't have lineups yet. There's always gonna be times where it's like, if there's ever a 2K catcher that makes into lineups, I just end up having a whole bunch of exposures to them.
Yeah.
Because more often than not, there'll be slates where no catcher homers and no catcher has a good game, especially when it's only a 6-game slate. Yeah. And then it becomes viable to just kind of punt the position. Right now, there's nobody like that is sticking out to me. So, I mean, the 2 catchers I have exposure to, Will Smith and then Salvador Perez, right? Because I said I want to get leverage off of Danny Duffy. Salvador Perez, who's shown a lot of power at the catcher position since coming back from a torn ACL. So he's somebody who I think is an individual catcher. Makes a lot of sense for me based on leverage. If you are out there playing Danny Duffy, don't play Salvador Perez. But if you're like me and you're looking to get leverage off of Danny Duffy, I think Salvador Perez is a good way to go.
Yeah, for sure. Also, Mejia makes sense. Salvador Perez is facing Fleming, by the way. So with Duffy, going against Duffy, you would go with Mejia, right? Because he's on the Rays, right?
Oh yeah, my bad. I totally messed that up. I was just looking at the matchups, and so
yeah,
that would be
3.1.
All right, so I meant Zunino. So Zunino, a catcher with power upside, also extreme boom bust option, Mike Zunino, but a guy who I'd say probably like in a week for Mike Zunino, he's probably going to start 4 games. He's going to homer once, and he's going to go 0 for in all the other 3 games. So as a boomer bust option, Mike Zunino is a little bit of leverage off of Danny Duffy.
They're actually not starting him today in the lineup. It's Mejia at catcher today, and he's batting 6, so 3.1K there. That's pretty good.
All right. So let's see. I might as well read off the Rays lineup now. So here, now that I have it here, Yandy Diaz, Arozarena, Lau, Margot. So Margot is going to be a good value hitter. Brousseau, Mejia, Wendell, Adames, and Kiermaier. So yeah, and I did by leverage. I meant to say Mike Zunino for the power upside before, and then I actually just said Salvador Perez because same game but on the other team. But
yeah, I like Perez though. I don't think Fleming is somebody that's going to get a bunch of strikeouts, so he gives up contact, and Sal can hit it really far even in 40-degree weather. Another guy I want to mention is Kurt Suzuki. He's in a projected lineup, not a confirmed lineup yet. So check that out for the Angels. But I like pretty much all the Angels facing Arihara.
And I'm just looking. We have had a couple of lineups that have come through on the show. So we do have the Royals lineup, the Giants lineup, and the Rays lineup has all come out. I see in the Giants lineup, I'll just lead it off. We've got Listelli, Yastrzemski, Longoria, Belt, Dickerson. So Dickerson's actually going to be somebody who I like as a value play. Then we have Austin Slater, Brandon Crawford, and then Casale, like you mentioned there. So, we have some of those lineups there, and I didn't have it updated on my screen before it started, but at least I have it on my screen because earlier in the day when I was doing the show, Google Chrome just crapped out on me, and then I was looking at nothing for the start of the show.
That's why we got 2 guys here. We pick each other up.
All right, so let's get into the first baseman. Now, for me, I think there's a very clear top pay at first base on DraftKings, and that is Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah.
So Ohtani, who I don't know what he has to do to get priced up, but he's been one of the best hitters in all of baseball this year. He's gone over 20 DraftKings points 3 times in the last week. Price never goes up. He's 4,600 now. Before he was hitting home runs, his price would go down by like $100 every slate. But from what we've seen so far, Ohtani should be somebody who's priced over 5K on both at least on DraftKings. Fanduel, the pricing is a little different. Fanduel is fairly expensive, but not on DK. The price isn't correct. So Ohtani right now is my most rostered first baseman, and overall, he's my highest owned hitter on all of DK.
Love it. Anybody on the Angels, please. Also, you probably faced this guy in Japan at some point. No, like both of these guys have been around for a while. So,
I did not think to look for Japanese BPP numbers.
So the reason that he never gets priced up on DraftKings is it because they include like his pitching numbers? Because his fantasy points per game on DraftKings is 1.4, which is way lower than everybody else. So I wonder if like their algorithm is messed up.
That could be. I mean, I know that he's totally broken it to the point where, here's what I've said. On days where he pitches, there should be 2 Ohtanis to roster. There should be a pitcher Ohtani and there should be a hitter Ohtani. So there is some way that you could roster both of them, because one of the things that makes him so fun as a player is because we have that novelty where he does both things, and it just doesn't apply to DFS because like, oh, he's pitching, so he's just broken everything. You only get pitching points from him and you can only roster him a pitcher. That's what I think the solution is. But anyway, the more overarching point is I really like Ohtani as an individual pitching play. And by the way, we just did get from the news guide on Negro Loco, we do have the Philadelphia Phillies lineup out. That is McCutchen, Hoskins, Harper, Real Muto, Alec Baum, Segura, Moniak, and Matt in there. So that is the Phillies lineup. And then one other first baseman who on the cheaper end I really like a lot is Brandon Belt. This is, where was his price? I think he was at 3,400 off the top of my head. Yeah, 3,400 on DK going up against Chase Anderson. Like I said before, I'm pretty heavy on the Giants today. I'm looking to target Chase Anderson. So to me, one of the best individual value plays there is Brandon Belt. He's relatively cheap on both FanDuel and DK. He's somebody that's going to be a core play for me. Who are the first basemen that you're looking to build around?
Yeah, Ohtani's the first name I have here. Then I have Walsh, Pujols, and Rios for the Dodgers. I actually like Muncy as well in your contrarian stacks because he's 5K facing a lefty. Not a lot of people play lefty-lefty matchups there. So I think people will skip him in those Dodger stacks. So he makes your stack a little bit contrarian. But yeah, basically just like all the Angels first baseman.
And anybody else that's standing out to you?
I have to like dig deep here. Mlb Dfs should be probably a guy you like because he's leading off versus Danny Duffy. So that's another guy you can play.
All right. Let's see. Yeah, nobody else that I think is really worth mentioning. Also, like I always try to hesitate to just throw out too many names. I know that already people get annoyed enough. I know just based on the way that I play MLB DFS, like I kind of get a little bit of exposure everywhere, but that's why I kind of try to focus it on saying like, hey, these are the spots that I'm over and underweight to the field on because baseball's such a high variance sport where it's not like NBA DFS. It's like, hey, I have this group of guys who have in like 80% of my lineups. Like baseball is so much more where I'm looking at top stacks and trying to find leverage and being like, hey, these are the guys I want to be over or underweight to. This is how I want to get leverage against them. So for the positions, I kind of prefer when we go through this that I just kind of throw out like, hey, here's the guy that I have the most exposure to at an expensive price. And here's the guy that I have the most exposure to at a cheap price. But anyway, with that in mind, let's move on to second baseman now. So at the second base spot, the guy who I have the most exposure to right now, well, two guys pretty much hand in hand, both on the cheaper end. We've got Mike Brousseau, who's going to be very popular and for good reason. He's underpriced in both Fanduel and Draftkings. And then also somebody who I like just because we're getting a little bit of leverage off of Danny Duffy there. So, by the way, now I was able to point out somebody on the Rays that I could use as leverage off of Danny Duffy, not accidentally saying Salvador Perez by accident. Mike Brousseau is on the Rays going up against Danny Duffy. And then somebody who I assume you're going to like a lot, and David Fletcher, who's a little bit underpriced on both FanDuel and DraftKings. Angel is one of the preeminent stacks on the slate in our top stacks pool, and team you said you were on as well. So Brousseau and Fletcher for me. How about for you?
It's the first two names I have as well. Fletcher is always the guy I leave off of my Angel stacks just because he doesn't hit for power. But at 3.7K and at second base, like I feel like he's underpriced now. He was pretty much in mid 4Ks to start the year. So I was always leaving him off. So I'm actually going to include him today. I like that play. I really like Mike Brousseau with all that power at 3.6K. He's a guy I can definitely see getting a home run off of Danny Duffy. Some other guys I have here are all kind of expensive. I like Taylor from the Dodgers. They're putting him in the middle of the lineup to break up the lefties now. So he was batting, I think, second last time. We only have the projected lineup. Last time they faced a lefty, he was batting second after Mookie. Now he's projected fifth. That's fine too. 4.7K is a little bit expensive. Guy has limited power as well, but definitely a guy that projects well. I like Whit Merrifield here versus Fleming. 5.4K is expensive, but this is another guy that's just like a massive fantasy producer and steals a lot of bases, which you don't see anymore. But somebody that can definitely give you upside by getting on base, even in a really cold game. So those are the guys that I have here. That's pretty much it. I have Cronenworth. I wanted to mention as well. He's 3.8K in the second spot in the projected lineup against Woodruff. Woodruff does struggle with some power against lefties. So he's a guy I could consider putting in some teams as well as a one-off.
And then something else I mentioned, just because we got a question about it. When I was reading off the Phillies lineup before, somebody said, who the hell is Matten? And by the way, he's not even in the player pool today on DraftKings or FanDuel. So he's starting in place of Didi Gregorius. I don't really know much about him. I assume that this is either his MLB debut or he does not have very many at-bats. But yeah, he's making a spot start in place of Gregorius today, and not somebody we have to concern ourselves with from our standpoint because he's not in the DraftKings or FanDuel player pool. So whatever. I guess that does make it a slightly lesser offense, but I mean, I know that you said before that you had some interest in Gausman. Does this make you more interested in him, that Didi's out of the lineup and Matten starting in his place?
Yeah, I mean, it does. I just like all the righties here against Gausman's split finger. I feel like he can really get a bunch of strikeouts here against this lineup. And like Moniak and Matten and Harper are the only guys from the left side. And they don't really scare me other than Bryce, but whatever. You know, Bryce also strikes out a bunch.
All right, so let's get on to the next position. Let's see, what order did I give it to here? All right, third base. I wasn't sure which position to say, just because I wanted to be in synchronicity with whatever I sent Tyler earlier in the day, and I did have third base next. So Mike Rousseau, by the way, also has third base eligibility. So I guess that's one of the reasons also that I have a bunch of exposure to him, is because he's multiple positions here. But by a pretty wide margin here, I have 19% exposure to Mike Rousseau. He's my most rostered third baseman, also my most rostered second baseman. We've already talked about him, but what other third basemen are standing out to you tonight?
The Dodgers third basemen are definitely super cheap in a good spot here with Sheldon Neuse and Rios in the projected lineup. So if either of those guys plays or both of them play, they make a lot of sense at 2.8 and 2K as a salary saver option. Somebody to pay up for, I already mentioned him, but I really like Longoria today at 4.5K versus Chase Anderson hitting in that 3 spot. I think he's an interesting play. Let's see, who else do we have here? Turner from the Dodgers is another third baseman, hits lefties well. It's a price up option at 5.5K. I think that's pretty much it. Oh, the only other guy I wanted to mention is Hunter Dozier. Feels a little bit underpriced at 3.1K. Has a bunch of power facing a lefty. So I like him as well.
Here, I'm just going to answer just because I think this is a question that's worth answering. A Olson 72178 is asking, when's NBA Live before lock, chat? During NBA Live before lock. That is that is the best way to answer it. So Charles is saying that Madden is in the DraftKings player pool. He wasn't listed on Fantasy Cruncher. Let me just pull up the DraftKings app to see if that's the case.
Yeah, he's not where I was looking. Let me see.
Yeah, he could be, and he's just not. He might just have to get added into.
Oh, they did just add him. Still. I think they just added him. He's 2,400.
2,400. All right. I mean, I'm not going to end up getting exposure to him most likely. If I am rostering somebody for cheap as an infielder, I mean, you mentioned Sheldon Neuse right there. I mean, just if I don't know if he's actually going to be in the Dodgers lineup, but he is projected right now to bat 8th. If that is the case, I mean, anybody who's in, a strong lineup like that definitely would be worth rostering him in price. The other thing, too, is that makes Dodger stacks much easier to get to. If there's a guy at the end of the order who's going to be just a flat min price, then that definitely makes the overall stack right there a lot cheaper than it normally would be.
Yeah, I also like these National League teams going into American League parks where, the pitcher doesn't hinder them anymore. And they can really turn over the lineup much better.
All right. Any other third baseman you want to talk about here?
Not really. I mean, I want to mention that Brock Holt is a third baseman. If you want to play him against Bundy and pretend like batting, what's it called? Like history means anything in baseball. Maybe it does in this spot. Never struck out in 17 at bats. That's a bunch of hits.
All right. Shortstops. There's a couple of interesting pay up options here. Trey Turner and Fernando Tatis, both kind of in a price tier of their own. If I'm getting to one of these guys today, I actually tend to lean a little bit more towards Trey Turner.
Yeah.
He did homer twice yesterday. The other thing with Fernando Tatis is I know that he's supposedly healthy right now, and he did homer the other day, but still he's yet to get a hit since hitting that home run. He only has 1 hit since coming back from the shoulder injury. I'm a little concerned about what his health is right now and moving forward. So if I have to roster one of these shortstops as a pay up option, I prefer Trey Turner. I have Trey Turner significantly more in my player pool right now. Who is your favorite pay up option for shortstop? And maybe is there somebody else that you really like here?
No, I love Trey. He is part of my NAD stack that I built. And just, Fernando Tatis is an amazing player, but he's facing Woodruff, where Trey's facing Flaherty. At this point in their careers, I don't think these two pitchers are on the same level. I think Woodruff is much, much better and much, much scarier. So, I definitely like Trey way more. I think Seager is going to go under-owned in Dodger stacks, just like I mentioned next month, just because he's 5.7K from the left side. So I like throwing him into the Dodger stacks. Hopefully Neuse is in there, and you can get to Seager and Muncy in those stacks, because I think that would make it really interesting. Those 3 guys, I think it's a really pay-up position today, where I just don't see cheaper guys that really have any upside. I mean, Willy Adames always has upside versus a lefty, so that's probably a guy that you will have some ownership versus Danny Duffy at 3.6K, right?
Yeah, for me, I'm getting to Brandon Crawford a little bit on the cheaper end.
Yeah.
Once again, just because the Giants are a team that I am looking to target fairly heavily. I think they're going under-owned. I like the matchup against Chase Anderson. Brandon Crawford, just based on the price point, easy to fit into Giant stacks. So somebody who I think on both FanDuel and DraftKings, also not picking up much ownership, is definitely a shortstop I want to get to. Also, double-digit fantasy points in 2 games in a row. So that's a little bit of a good look for him. But Brandon Crawford, a guy who's been a good but not great fantasy asset for a little while now, just at the cheap price. I think that he's worth getting to. That pretty much covers the shortstops. Now, outfield, somebody already mentioned Shohei Ohtani. I said he's overall my most rostered hitter on this slate at first base position, but he's first base and outfield eligibility that makes him a little bit easier to fit into lineups. I know you were on board with me on that, but who else are you looking at as outfielders?
I really like Pollock here, 3.1K, facing Sheffield. Hopefully he's in the lineup. He usually is versus a lefty, and he always smashes lefties throughout his career. So I really like Pollock here. I already mentioned Trout. I think Trout hits a home run today. I know it's not much of a leap, but at 6K, I don't know how many people are going to get to it, especially if they're rostering Musgrove. So I think Trout is a really good spot. I like Soto here as well, 5.8K, and Harper for that matter. All these expensive guys. I feel like now the more that I look at my lineups, I'm gonna have more cheap pitchers here and playing Bundy as an SP1, and then going to Gausman or an Anderson as my SP2. So that's just my builds because I like a lot of the expensive hitters.
Here I'm going to read off. We just got the Angels lineup. Nothing real surprising here. We've got Fletcher, Ohtani, Trout, Upton, Walsh, Pujols, Iglesias, Suzuki, and Rengifo. That rounds out their lineup. So nothing really there unexpected.
Yeah.
Just to recap, I believe you did say earlier that you thought the Angels were going to be a team that you were targeting pretty heavily. So of the outfielders there, obviously we have Mike Trout, Justin Upton, Shohei Ohtani. If you had to roster one of these guys, and I think we're rostering all of them, but which is the one you think warrants the most exposure?
To me, it's Mike Trout, just because I believe Arihara gives up a little bit more power from the right side. And I mean, Mike Trout's the best hitter in baseball, so it's not much of a leap to say that he's the best option. And at 1.4K more than Ohtani, I'm thinking he's going to be under-owned compared to Ohtani.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, if I had the salary in all my lineups, I would say I'd play Mike Trout everywhere if there was no salary cap restrictions. But unfortunately, that is the case. And it's also a little different FanDuel versus DraftKings just because Ohtani is a little bit more priced up on FanDuel. So
yeah,
I would say for FanDuel purposes, Ohtani warrants more exposure. DraftKings purposes right now, Ohtani's overall my most rostered hitter, and it's really just a price point thing, right? If Ohtani was $500-$600 more expensive, then I probably would have more exposure to Mike Trout, but he's not. And also that we get Ohtani, we could roster him at first base or any of the outfield spots. So
yeah.
For that reason, I have more exposure to Ohtani than I do to Trout, but still these are two of my most rostered hitters. From a value standpoint, another Tampa Bay Ray that I think makes sense for leverage. Manuel Margot going up against Danny Duffy, really cheap price. Like I said, a little bit of leverage there. He's cheap on both FanDuel and DraftKings. A little bit of power upside of Margot as well. And oddly, there might not be truth to this, but at least to my recollection, it seems like a lot of the games where he has one extra base hit, he has multiple of them. Like we saw in the playoffs too. He had that game where I think he had 3 homers and just broke a single game slate. And I think he had like 2 or 3 multiple homer games in the playoffs last year. But leverage against Danny Duffy, I think Manuel Margot is one of the guys that makes a whole lot of sense as part of Rays stacks. Who are you looking at for value at the outfield position?
Yeah, for value, I definitely like Margot. I like Willie Calhoun. A little bit of power upside. He's only 2.6K and batting in the middle of that Rangers lineup. So I definitely am going to get some exposure to him. And then who's the guy from the Phillies? Yeah, the Mackenzie Moniak here at 2.2K feels really cheap versus Gausman, and Gausman does struggle with power to lefties. So if you want to pay all the way down and get a bunch of expensive hitters and expensive pitchers, Moniak makes sense as well.
All right. Any other outfielders or anybody we want to mention? If not, we could hit the roundup on the show.
I like Soler as well at 3.3.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention him versus Fleming.
All right, guys, if you've not already done it, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, because as I've been saying all year, if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, your hitter's 33% more likely to hit a homer. So right there, you get just guaranteed Manu Margot homer if you subscribe to the YouTube channel. But anybody else who rosters Manu Margot, they don't even get the home run. The points don't count if they're not subscribed to the YouTube channel. So extra fantasy points if you subscribe for no reason other than I said so. This is not like what are some of the stuff people say on Twitter? This is not legally binding advice. This is not financial advice, but I just say so and do us a favor and subscribe. So let's wrap this up, Max. Just an overall summation of the slate. Who are your favorite pitchers to roster today?
Dustin May, Bundy, and I'll throw Woodruff in there as well.
All right. So for me, my favorite pitching combination on DraftKings today for GPPs is Dustin May and Dylan Bundy. For cash games, I think it is Joe Musgrove and Dylan Bundy. Joe Musgrove, super popular play on the slate, I think for a good reason, but it's hard for me to get quite to the 42% number. I said earlier, he's my second most rostered pitcher on the slate. Still not getting to him where the field is just because it's so much exposure going to him. For FanDuel, my favorite overall pitcher is Dylan Bundy. For cash games, though, I'd still say Joe Musgrove in cash just because he's so popular. And now getting into stacks, who are your favorite stacks today?
So my favorite stack is the Angels, followed by, let's see, I'm going to go with the Nats second, and then the Dodgers third.
So for me, on the high end, if I'm paying all the way up for a team, it's still going to be the Dodgers. We just have them with much better odds of being the top scoring team on the slate than pretty much everybody else. The Giants, for me, is also a priority stack. And then just for leverage, I'm going to go to the Tampa Bay Rays off of Danny Duffy, just because we have Duffy projecting for 40% ownership right now. And I think it's a little bit egregious. So I like the I like the leverage that we get on the Rays going up against Danny Duffy. But other than that, guys, that is going to do it for us. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the video, and good luck tonight.